Section 56. Solving quadratic equations by factoring. We don't need to use the A, B's, and C's yet. And this will not be a very long section. We've talked about factoring already, quadratic equations. If you haven't understood 1x squared, not 3x squared, but 1x squared, you put x in a bracket and x in another set of brackets, put a number here and a number here. The two numbers should multiply out to the constant, have to equal 0. Should multiply out to the c value and add up to the number in front of x. Well, numbers that multiply out to 6 are 1 and 6, 2 and 3, 3, I already said, that is I don't have to write 3 and 2 and then 6 and 1 again. So let's not do that. But there are some others, like -1 and -6 and -2 and -3. But nonetheless, that's the pair of numbers that add up to 5. I know they multiply out to 6 because that's why I put them down here, because they multiply out to 6. And this product is 0. Now, forget the fact that it equals 0 for a moment. If I ask you what this equals if x is 5, well, most of you would say 5 plus 2 is 7 and 5 plus 3 is 8. I'm not so clear what you would do after that. Some of you might just stop there. 7 and 8, that's the answer. The answer would be 56. We are multiplying what's between the brackets. This times that. Shorthand of writing that is just don't put the dot in between. But it's understood to be times. X plus 2 times x plus 3. So if x were 5, then it would be 56. But x is not 5, and the product is not 56. I know what the product is. It tells me this times that equals 0. The product is 0. So we're multiplying two numbers. We're multiplying x plus 2, and we're multiplying x plus 3. One of them must be 0. One of them must be 0. After all, if x, like a moment ago, x plus 2 was 7 and x plus 3 was 8, the product wasn't 0. One of those has to be 0. Else the product will not be 0. And if one of them is 0, it doesn't matter what the other one is. X plus 2 is 0 when x is -2. And x plus 3 is 0 when x is -3. These are your answers. And to convince you, -2 plus 2, that's 0. And -2 plus 3 is not 0. It's 1. But nonetheless, the product is 0. When x is -3, plugging it in right here, we have x plus 2 in brackets times x plus 3 in brackets. Well, this is -1, but that's 0. And yes, when you multiply, you do get 0. That's a nice thing about 0. It's called a domain. If you multiply two things and you get 0, one or both of those things were 0. The quote things in our problem was x plus 2 and x plus 3. If you had another problem, 3x squared is equal to 2 minus 5x. Well, first, before you can factor, you need to get it into standard form. You need to write it as a general equation of a quadratic. That it should equal 0. Bring the 5x over, the 3x squared will stay, The minus 5x comes over across the equal sign is plus 5x. And the understood plus 2 crosses the equal sign is minus 2. And this is 0. Now we want to factor this. Now how do we factor? Well, first thing you should ask yourself is, like always, can you factor out anything in common? And there's nothing that goes into 2, 5, and 3 other than 1. So now you have to factor by grouping. You multiply the a value by the c value, the coefficient of x squared by the constant, and you get negative 6. Then you want two other numbers that multiply out to negative 6, but add up to 5. And the answer will be 6 and negative 1. They multiply out to negative 6 if they add up to 5. And then you say, oops, I don't want that second number to be negative. So I will switch, I want it to be positive. So I will switch the two numbers. And then I rewrite the top line, but instead of 5x, I will write minus 1x plus 6x. But everything else stays the same. The 3x squared, and the minus 2, and the fact that it equals 0 stays the same. You factor the first two, you factor the last two. And we did get our plus in the middle. That means we don't have to change that sign. And from the first bracket, you can factor out an x. And you get 3x minus 1. From the second bracket, you can factor out a 2. And you'll also get 3x minus 1 left over equals 0. Since these are the same, we're doing it correctly. And now we will factor out the 3 minus 1. And what's left over is x plus 2. And what's in the first bracket times what's in the second bracket is 0. So that means either what's in the first bracket is 0, or what's in the second bracket is 0. For the first bracket to be 0, 3x must be 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. So 3x must be 1. Divide by 3, you get x is 1/3, or for this to be equal to 0, x must be negative 2. And there are your two answers. X equals 1/3, or x equals negative 2. And you would check it by plugging in, say, negative 2 here and here, and making sure that the equal sign is right. That is, 3 times negative 2 squared does equal 2 minus 5 times negative 2. And why don't we actually do that? Negative 2 squared is 4. So 3 times 4. Why are we not writing? 3 times 4, negative 2 squared is 4, is 12. Does that equal to 2 minus 5 times negative 2? Well, negative 5 times negative 2 is positive 10, and yep, 12. 2 plus 10 is 12. So we did check. And you would do the same for 1/3. Plug in 1/3 where you see x. Make sure you get their left side equals the right side. And if you don't, you should make sure you did your check correctly. And if you're convinced you checked it correctly, well, then you have an error in your work. The work that you did to come up with the two answers. If you have x squared over 2 is equal to x minus 3 over 8. Well, one doesn't like fractions, so you look at the denominators, 2 and 8. You ask yourself for their LCD, that is the least common multiple. And that magic number is 8. If you multiply by 8, two things will happen. One, the denominators will all go into them, and the second thing is it's the smallest number that 2 and 8 go into. So you'll have 4x squared is equal to 8 times x, or 8x, minus 3 times 1 is 3. Bring everything over to the other side. So you have 4x squared minus 8x plus 3 is equal to 0. And then you try to factor, and you realize you can't. You can't factor out anything. So then the right side is 0, but we're going to try to factor the left side by multiplying those 2 and getting 12. Now I want two numbers that multiply out to 12, a positive number, 12. That means the signs are either both the same or both different. No other way of getting a positive 12. Two numbers that multiply out to 12 that add up to negative 8. Those numbers are negative 6 and negative 2. And when it comes to the negative 8x, we're going to write minus 6x minus 2x. And since they're both negative, there's no way I'm going to get the second number to be positive. So there it is. On the line up below, I group the first two, I group the second two. Since there's a minus in the middle, no matter what that sign is, in the middle of the second bracket, it has to change. It was plus, it is now minus. From the first bracket, I can factor out a 2 and an x. So I get 2x. Well, 2x times 2x gives me 4x squared minus, and 2x times 3 gives me 6x minus. The only thing I can factor out from that second bracket is a 1. And I can sneak it in and it equals 0. So from the left side of the equal sign, I can factor out the 2x minus 3 and 2x minus 1 survive. And this is 0. So either 2x minus 3 is 0 or 2x minus 1 is 0. So in the first case, that means 2x must be 3. 3 minus 3 is 0. 2x must be 3. Divide by 3. If you subtract two quantities and you get 0, those two things are equal. If you subtract 2x and 1 and you get 0, that's because 2x is 1. Divide by 2, you get x to the half. So it's 3 halves and 1 half. Those are the answers. Now, I wouldn't really check it in here, only because you may have made a mistake going from the original equation to that equation. Now, if for some reason you insist to yourself, not to me because I won't believe it, if you insist to yourself that no way can you check it here because you have fractions and then you're plugging in fractions, fine, check it in this line there. Okay? If it checks in the second line, your answer will be correct so long as from the first to the second line you didn't make a mistake. I mean, after all, if this second line is wrong, you found the answers to the wrong problem. Let's suppose you didn't make any other mistakes. That is, these are the answers for line number 2. But line number 2 is wrong. Make believe. Well, then your answers are wrong. Like I said before, if you make a mistake, your answer is going to be wrong. Okay, but we didn't make a mistake, and the answer is 3 halves and 1 half. Alright, let's suppose you have this problem. You have x take away 2 times x plus 1, and this is equal to 6x plus 2. This is a quadratic equation. You have to get it equal to 0. So we'll FOIL out the left side. X times x is x squared. You add 1x, but you take away 2 x's. You go to the bank and you deposit $1, and then you go back later and you take out $2. The net result is you took out $1. Negative 2 times positive 1 is negative 2. And this is 6x plus 2. Since there's an understood 1x squared on the left side, I'm going to bring everything to the left. I'm going to take away 6x's from both sides, and I'm going to take away 2 from both sides. On the right side, what do you know? I get 0. On the left side, I get x squared minus 7x's minus 4. And then I get completely stuck because I cannot think of two numbers that multiply out to negative 4 that add up to 7. The only numbers I know that multiply out to negative 4 are these 3 numbers. 1 and negative 4, 2 and negative 2, and 4 and negative 1. And none of them add up to negative 7. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to change that plus 2. I'm going to change the plus 2, and I had the marker in my hand. I didn't do that well. Okay. Instead of plus 2, I want to have minus 8. Which means I'm going to add 8 to both sides. I'm going to add 8 to both sides. Negative 2 plus 8 is 6. Now, instead of the undoable that we just had, I think this one's doable. I want two numbers that multiply out to 6 but add up to negative 7. I would think that negative 1 and negative 6 will do that. Negative 1 and negative 6 will oblige. So, either that's 0. If you subtract 2 things and you get 0, immediately equate the 2 things. X equals 1. This minus that is 0, and this equals that. These two must be equal. And there's the answer. X is 1 or X equals 6. Let's check 6. Copying from the left, X, instead of X I'm going to write 6. X minus 2 times X plus 1. This should equal to 6 times X minus 8. 4 times 7, 28. Does it equal to 36 minus 8? 36 minus 8, what do you know, is 28. So we did check. Let's check for 1. X minus 2 times X plus 1 should equal to 6x minus 8. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. It should equal to 6 minus 8. But that is minus 2. So it did check, and it's not the hardest of things to check. Okay, that finishes section number 56, entitled Solving Quadratic Equations by Factoring. First thing you do is you get it to be, you write it in general form. You write it as a general quadratic equation, and then you factor. Okay, good luck with it.